Well, it's a pleasure to have Senator Marco Rubio with us. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very cold. Are you in Florida or in Washington?
Yeah, no, we're not in Florida. We're in Washington.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's not right. It's a global warming.
Yeah. This weather, humans weren't built for this. I mean, at least I'm not. Anyway, Senator, it's a pleasure to have you. Tell everybody, or let's begin this process. Tell us what you're thinking about on immigration and how you would like to go forward.
Well, a couple things come to mind. The first is we've been dealing with this now for a very long time, and I think it's time to once and for all deal with it in a way that's responsible, and I want to outline, and thank you for the opportunity to do it. Let me start by saying that legal immigration is good for America, and I mean by a system that works for us has always been good. Now, every country in the world has immigration laws, and every country in the world expects to be able to enforce those immigration laws, and we're no different. But legal immigration is good for America, and unfortunately, we have a broken legal immigration system, and we also have a significant illegal immigration problem. So I think the way we approach it is through three basic principles. I think the first two are not really controversial. The first involves modernizing our legal immigration. For example, only a very small percentage of the people that are immigrating to this country do so based on skill and talent. We can't afford that in the 21st century. We've got to increase the number of people that come based on skill and talent. So we need to, reform the legal immigration system. The second part of it is enforcement. Your laws are only as good as your ability to enforce it. Obviously, that means securing and getting operational control of the border, which is largely a function of investing in infrastructure and manpower. But the most effective thing really is the workplace enforcement, whether it's E-Verify or something like it, some system that makes it difficult, if not impossible, for those who are undocumented to be able to get a job, because that's largely the biggest driver. And one point that's not talked about enough is that we have to do a better job of tracking visitors in our country, because 40% of our illegal immigration are people that come legally, but then they overstay the visa. And one of the things we don't do is we track when people come in, but we're not tracking when people leave, so we don't even know who some of these folks are. Those two things, I think, have general support. It's the third that I think is going to be the most difficult, because on the one hand, we have 11 million people in this country that are undocumented, and that I'm not happy about. I don't think anyone's pleased with that reality, but it's the reality of what we have, and we've got to deal with it. We've got to deal with it in a way that's responsible, humane, but responsible, because what we don't want to do is, number one, we don't want to be unfair to people that have done it the right way, and number two is we don't want to be here 5 years from now dealing with another 11 million people. So whatever we do, we have to make sure it doesn't contribute to that. And what I've outlined is the following. Obviously, we have to identify the people that are undocumented. If they've committed any serious crime, they're going to be deported. Otherwise, they're going to have to pay a fine and back taxes, and they're going to have to know English. They're going to have to do community service. There's a host of things they'll have to do. And what they will get in exchange for that is the equivalent of a work permit. It's a non-immigrant visa. And let me tell you, under a non-immigrant visa, you don't qualify for welfare. You don't qualify for government benefits. You don't qualify for any of these things. All you qualify for is the ability to stay in the country legally and work in a renewable non-immigrant visa, a non-permanent visa. You can't become a citizen with one of those or any of those sorts of things. After some period of time, and these folks, like anybody else in the world would be able to do, they'll be able to apply for a green card, but they'd have to do it through the regular immigration process. Now, they'll have to be in this probationary system for some period of time, which is not unreasonable, but significant. Because, for example, right now, if you violate our immigration laws, you have to wait 10 years before you can apply for a green card. So they have to be in that probationary phase. And then what they would have the opportunity to do is get in line and apply for a green card through the same system that anybody else anywhere in the world would have to use, which means you have to wait in line, and when your turn comes up, you have to qualify for the visa that you're applying for. And then if they go through that process, which is a significant one, then you get a green card, which still doesn't make you a citizen. You still have to wait another 5 years before you apply for citizenship. So, look, this is an issue I wish we didn't have. I wish we didn't have to deal with it. But I'm trying to figure out a way to deal with it that's responsible and that we can get done. Otherwise, what we have right now is de facto amnesty.
Yep,
because what we have right now is a system where the law is not being enforced. There's not a legal immigration system that works. And a president that, quite frankly, has no interest in any of those two things. And I think we'll have some challenges with this because, for example, if we do a guest worker program, because we realize that there are, agricultural necessities that, for 3 months out of come in and work and then go back to their countries. The labor unions don't like that, and that's going to be a big fight the president's going to have if he's really interested in moving this forward. So these are the general outlines of principles that I think we can come up with a solution. As I said, I wish we didn't have this problem, but we do, and I'm just trying to figure out the best way for our country to address it.
And I suspect even if all conservatives and Republicans backed your suggestions here, the fight would be with Obama and Reid and them, because they do want amnesty and they do want citizenship, and they are not that hot about securing the border and so forth.
Well, they're going to have a decision to make, and that decision is, do they want to play politics with this issue? In essence, do they want to get into a bidding war where they continue to move the ball and water it down, or are they serious about solving it? And if they're serious about solving it, then I think these are the sorts of principles they'd want to support, because I think they'd have broad support and they make sense to people, even though most people aren't happy about having to deal with this. But on the other hand, if what they're looking for is a political cause, what they're looking for is to play politics with an issue, then I would imagine they're probably going to say this is not good enough, and they're going to want something more lenient. Now, I've made a habit of not questioning people's motives until they give me a reason to. So, let's see what they come up with regards to these principles.
That's all right. That's what I'm here for.
Well, anyway. It happens. At some point, you'll have to do that, But what I'm saying is, that's what they do. If you understand, that's what the other side does constantly. You can't. There's no such thing as an honest policy disagreement with the left anymore. If you disagree with them, you're a bad person. You want dirty water and dirty air,
right,
and you want to take away benefits from people, and I don't. We shouldn't be about that. We have evidence and history on our side of the things we stand for. We can prove that limited government and free enterprise creates prosperity and freedom and liberty. And so, if we stick to that, we're going to win more than we lose.
Now, but I want to make it clear. You want operational security of the border, and you want enforcement of in the workplace of existing law.
Well, let me tell you the problem with that. In the past, people say that, but then what happens is they go ahead and do the process of legalization, but they don't do the security. So one of the things I should have mentioned, which is important to these principles, is the security component is a trigger. In essence, none of that other stuff with regards to getting in line and applying, none of that happens until we've been able to certify that, indeed, the workplace security thing is in place, the visa tracking is in place, and there's some level of significant operational control at the border. And obviously, we're going to have to come up with a way of certifying the border issue. I think the workplace enforcement will be a little bit easier because you either have it or you don't. But that's a trigger. In essence, I don't think that any of these other things I've talked about happens with regards to people getting in line until that happens. That's an important point that I think is non-negotiable.
This is very fascinating to me. I'm going to take a much closer look at this, and I'm going to try and keep an open mind about it, because I'm pretty fed up with what's going on these border towns and these border states, which is horrific. And as you know, we've got drug activity slipping over the border. We've got the kidnapping slipping over the border. It's extremely dangerous all along the border, and nobody wants to talk about the crime that's coming into this country.
Yeah, and here's the thing about the border. It's an immigration issue, sure, but it's a much bigger crime and national security problem. I mean, look, I'm not in favor of a agricultural worker sneaking across the border. I'm not in favor of that. But what keeps me up at night is a terrorist with a bomb coming across the border. What keeps me up at night is a drug runner or a human trafficker coming across the border. These are the things that when we talk about border security, it's really much more of a national security issue than it is simply an immigration one. But obviously it's coming up in the context of this whole conversation. You said something that was important. These are principles I hope we can build some solution around. Obviously, I understand people out there have different ideas. We've gotten a lot of input since we first started talking about this, and I welcome that. I think that's important that people offer their input. I by no means ever claim to be like I know everything, have the answer to everything. One of the ways a republic is supposed to work is your leaders offer ideas and then your people give their input. So we're always interested in ways to make it better.
While I have you, only another minute or two, let me ask you this question. Harry Reid's talking about gutting the filibuster, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what do they want to do, ram through a bunch of judges now, or ram through the spending and so forth? I mean, what can the Republicans do in the Senate to stop this if he pulls this?
Well, the truth is there appears to be a number of Democrats that are worried about it because they remember when they were in the minority, and they understand that the chances are they'll one day be in the minority again. So I think that's good news. But let me just say this about the rules of the Senate. The Senate can be a frustrating place, but it was designed. I mean, the framers never envisioned a federal government that was as involved as this one is. They deliberately set up a system that made it difficult for the government to do things because they didn't want the government doing that many things. And the Senate is a key part of that. One of the reasons why the Senate doesn't work is the leadership's fault, is Leader Reid's fault, because he does not allow legitimate amendments on bills to be heard. And so if you tell a senator that from a state, every state only has two, I will not allow your amendments to be heard on a bill, that senator's only options is to say, well, then we're not going to move forward on the bill. This process, what's the big deal? Let's have votes on these amendments, stop protecting incumbents from taking difficult votes. You know, that's one of the reasons why we haven't passed the budget in over 1,000-something days, is because they don't want to take tough votes. So, you know, I hope the public's waking up to this, because the media is making it sound like that the problem in the Senate is obstructionist Republicans. That's not true. The problem in the Senate is that valid issues cannot get a vote or a hearing because the leadership has prevented that from happening.
Well, my friend, I appreciate you coming on the program. You're doing a great job. Hang in there, and God bless you.
Thank you for having me on. You're always very gracious and generous with your time. I look forward to coming back and talking about this and all the other stuff that's going to come up this year.
All right, Senator. Be safe. God bless. He and I actually go back a ways. When he was at 5% in the polls, this was the first show to endorse Rubio against Crist, and I'm glad I did. You don't have to agree with everything he said, but listen to him. He's a thinker. He's a problem solver. He's a conservative. Like I say, you don't have to agree with everything he said. But he even said, oh, look, I'm open to ideas. I'm open to suggestions. Let's advance our principles. This is a problem. We've got to address this problem. And he's right. We have de facto amnesty right now. And when he said it, it set a light bulb off. Maybe I'm a little slow. I said, well, he's right. We do have de facto amnesty, which is exactly why Obama wants to really do nothing.